How critical is a long-term trade agreement to the survival of the mold-making industry?
I mean, that is vital. I don't want to say, I would say that is supremely important. With 240 or so thousand employees in Windsor-Essex region, basically every other person will be directly impacted.
In our recent videos, we showed you the warning signs, the timelines, the jobs at risk, and how quickly this industry could spiral. Now, industry leaders are testifying in Ottawa, and they're confirming everything. This isn't theoretical, it's happening in real time. The question is no longer if this causes damage, it's how much, and the numbers are already climbing.
Let's take a look.
If this industry weakens, every household in the region will feel economic pain. The revised 232 tariffs have national implications for jobs, growth, defense readiness, Canada's resilience, and long-term prosperity. Why this matters nationally. Windsor-Essex is one of the most intensive manufacturing regions across Canada. We have 48,800 jobs, so 1 in 5 employees in Windsor-Essex are in this industry. We have Canada's most intense, largest tool die and mold cluster, valued at approximately $2 billion, with approximately 85% of that heading to the United States. Unemployment currently sits at about 8.5%, down from 11.2% in mid-2025. Manufacturing here in Windsor-Essex is not peripheral, it's foundation to our region and to Canada's economy. So what's changed? This is no longer a steel tariff. It's a tax on Canadian manufacturing. Our companies don't ship raw steel, my companies. They ship finished, value-added products. What's being taxed now isn't just the inputs, it's labor, it's engineering, it's innovation. The impact is immediate. We're seeing tariff exposure multiply overnight. What used to cost a few $1,000s is now in the tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars of tariffs. At that level, contracts don't adjust, they become unworkable. And when contracts become unworkable, production decisions must follow. The damage is not just at the end of the supply, it's upstream, where the work actually begins. In Windsor-Essex, that means machinery manufacturing industry, NAICS code 333, represents 8,000 jobs across 188 firms, nearly $80,000 in average wage. Extrapolating that to Ontario, we're looking at 62,000 jobs, and at the national level, 149,000 jobs. When you use standard economic multipliers of approximately 3, that's 25,000 jobs in Windsor-Essex, and a shocking 450,000 jobs nationally. This is just one of the potential industry codes that are being affected. This is where the issue becomes bigger than tariffs. The Windsor-Detroit corridor is one of the most integrated manufacturing regions in the world. For decades, our region, and a large part of Ontario, has been deeply integrated with our purchasers, suppliers, colleagues, and oftentimes family on the United States side of the border. Although this relationship is currently challenged, it's vital to recognize the deep and mutually beneficial ties to our two countries have had and will continue to have. Parts in this industry cross the border multiple times. That system depends on predictability. Right now, this is not predictable. A mutually beneficial trade deal with the United States allows for this predictability. Without predictability, if this continues, the results are straightforward. Production will shift, investment will follow, jobs will move.
This is important, folks. So this particular witness, his name's Ryan Donnelly, and he's the president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce down in Windsor-Essex. And he represents 775 different companies and over 80,000 workers. It's just what he represents. And he is not partisan. He's not conservative. He's not liberal. He's not NDP. He's not anything in between. What his job is to just represent the businesses that are in his region. Doesn't matter who's in power. His job is just to advocate for them. And you hear these numbers. This isn't coming from business owners, right? Because some people may pass that off as, oh, well, it's just the business owners. They're being dramatic. They're, over-articulating their position in order to try and get some sort of benefit. This is not a business owner. This is somebody that's at an organization, and their job is to just put forward really non-emotional proposals and non-emotional advocacy. But what he's saying should be causing a lot of concern, not just for people in Windsor, but across the country. Because you hear those numbers, up to 450,000 jobs indirectly affected by what's going on. And he's saying, that's not all of them that I'm talking about. I'm just talking about one section, one job classification. So when we started covering this story and we were saying that there's imminent collapse, that wasn't exaggeration. It may have actually been an understatement.
At the same time, the Government of Canada has been clear about its priorities. Through a recent defence and industrial strategic frameworks advanced by Prime Minister Carney, our country must, and I agree, rebuild domestic industrial supply, strengthen allied supply chains, reduce dependency on non-aligned offshore producers, and treat industrial inputs as strategic assets. Here's the contradiction. Section 232 tariffs are actively weakening the very upstream base those strategies depend on. The tooling and advanced manufacturing industry is not optional infrastructure. It is the enabling layer beneath defense manufacturing, automotive and EV production, aerospace components, energy, critical minerals, and infrastructure projects. If we lose tooling capability, we do not reshore defense production, we do not control timelines, we do not control costs, and we do not control security of supply. If we lose that capability, we lose more than production. We lose control of our national and economic security.
This is a very important point. So what he's saying is that, listen, most of our industry that actually creates things that other companies use to create things, this is where the imminent collapse is. So Mark Carney is out there saying, well, you know, we want to invest in national defense and we want to invest in aerospace and want to invest in all these other things and all these other industries. This guy is saying, sure, fine, I'm on board. No problem. The problem is, this is what he says, this is where the contradiction is because Mark Carney has done literally nothing to restore this trade relationship with the United States, that is going to collapse this industry sector. All of the industries that actually make things in order to make things, that turn raw material into tools so that other companies can actually make their products. And that goes not just to, you know, rubber tubs that you find in Walmart. It's in the aerospace industry. It's in the defense industry. So,
it's in the automotive industry. I mean, during this testimony, and you can watch the full thing on Pearl View, they were saying that a lot of cars are made in Windsor, and these dye companies produce the dyes that are then shipped to these car companies, and the car companies make parts using these dyes and these molds. So if the mold companies all collapse and disappear, then who's going to supply the car manufacturers? And then they won't be able to make cars. And then what?
and the tool companies make these huge expensive tools. They're not making hammers, folks. They're making huge factory tools that these other companies use in order to actually make what they need to. So you end up having this entire industry that turns raw material into tooling for other companies to use. That collapses, which then has a cascading effect on other companies. So his main point is if we lose that, Canada now loses the ability to actually make the things that these other companies need, and that can affect our national security, because now those companies that are in Canada that are taking on defense contracts, that are making things for the military, that are making things for aerospace, now they have to rely on companies in other countries.
Like China, perhaps?
China, Mexico, the United States. Wow. So in Mark Carney's quest to be less reliant on the United States, he's actually going to be making Canadian companies more reliant on the United States. And this is what all of these experts are jumping up and down and waving their arms and sounding the warning alarm that something needs to be done right now.
Just one more quick question, short answer, please. How long can your companies continue to operate under the current tariff regime before permanent cuts come, before closures?
I would say something's going to happen over the course of this year.
Mr. Donnelly, what would help your members and companies like that in my riding who are so reliant on the U.S. market to diversify? Do you have some examples for us?
Thank you, through your chair, to MP Gold. I briefly touched on it, but right now what the industry is facing is a 10% tariff on finished goods. And my members, and I can speak to Southwestern Ontario, specifically Windsor, Essex, they recognize that within the next 3 to 6 months, they are going to face very dire cash flow issues. And what that means is, as I alluded earlier, they're going to have to make decisions. And those decisions may be to close their shop, because many of the ownership of these companies are, 50s, 60s, ready to close it up. And they've been challenged with multiple challenges over the past decades. That being said, they are getting requested to move to the United States. That is a question that is out there and is quite regular from some of the purchasers. I think in order to maintain this industry, and likely the industries you're speaking about also, I do believe that there is an immediate need for cash flow support to make sure that these companies still continue to exist in 6 months to a year. I can say that there are, and I've had conversations, people are looking to diversify. They recognize, and many of the companies have already, it's not just auto, right? Like it's applied all throughout the industry. They're looking to make those changes. They can't make those changes under this type of cost pressure and this type of intense pressure.
First gentleman, Keenan Loomis, responds to the question. Within a year, these companies are gone. Back to Mr. Donnelly. Liberals ask, well, because we haven't been paying attention to this at all, because we're completely ignorant and not doing our job in the government, what do you need? What do you need in order to diversify, in order to actually satisfy Mark Carney's talking point? And the guy says, listen, the companies have been trying to diversify. This isn't something new that they've been, all of a sudden just forced to reckon with. But they have no money. They can't make decisions. This is consistent with the first committee when the guys are saying, listen, I don't know what to tell my sales guys because I don't know what's going to be the environment in the next 3 to 6 months.
Well, and further to that, and I don't recall if it was this gentleman or someone else in this testimony, but the point was raised that some of these items that are being made are extremely, extremely heavy. It's almost impossible to ship them overseas. That's why they sell to the United States.
And you end up having this completely integrated supply chain, which we keep talking about over and over, where their primary customer is in the United States. It doesn't make any sense for them to actually, sell to these other companies. So this is not, I keep harping on this because it's so important. This is not something that we're talking about, that it's a hypothetical in 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years. It's happening right now. And that's what he says. In the next 3 to 6 months, some decisions have to be made. What kind of decisions? Yeah, they're choosing whether or not to shut their company down.
And it's not just one company. It's many, many companies in this industry.
And again, that has that downstream effect of affecting all of the manufacturing jobs, not just in Windsor, not just in Ontario, across the country.
How critical is a long-term trade agreement to the survival of the mold-making industry?
I mean, that is vital. I don't want to say, I would say that is supremely important. 85% approximately, if not more, of the products that are manufactured in our region go to the United States, and even more go through Ontario and then eventually end up in the United States. So a long-term relationship, the continued long-term relationship with the Americans is vital for my region.
And so we've heard that manufacturing represents roughly 1 in 5 jobs in Windsor, Essex. And what would be the outcome for our regional economy if this sector is disrupted? And do you have an estimate of how many indirect jobs would be affected as well?
Thank you, through your chair, Borelli. 48,000 jobs, 48,800. So again, 1 in 5 jobs. The economic multiplier as it relates to that, NAICS code 333 is generally accepted to be a 3 to 1. So that's quickly 150,000. So with 240 or so thousand employees in Windsor Essex region, basically every other person will be directly impacted. That doesn't even trickle down. I mean, we represent 775 members across Windsor Essex Chamber of Commerce. We've got approximately 40 of those that are manufacturers, starting from OEMs, Stellantis, Ford, et cetera, all the way down to the lowest level where it's a single employee sole proprietor. It would be impossible for that type of economic impact in our region to not impact every single one of those.
So pretty much all of the jobs in the Windsor-Essex region are going to be impacted if the Liberal government does not fix this.
Well, think about it. So what he's saying there is, the core of it, let's just round it up to around 50,000 jobs. Those are the jobs that will be directly impacted. And he's saying economic modeling says indirect is 3 to 1. So that brings it all the way up to 150,000. And he's saying that it's around, just over 200,000 total employees around the region. Can you imagine where you live right now? Half the people are all of a sudden out of work. That's staggering.
That's a lot of people to worry about. A lot of children in those families, and I worry about those families putting food on the table and paying their mortgages every month, if we don't come to a resolution for this. Can you explain, please, for everyone here, how integrated the Canada-U.S. manufacturing supply chain is, particularly in tooling and mold making, and why it's so crucial that we get a deal?
Yes, thank you. Through Chair to MP Borelli. Oftentimes right now the original steel block is brought in from the United States. They've got specialized steel that has been used for decades. Looking forward to working more with Mr. Loomis to make sure that that's Canadian steel. But that is transformed into essentially what makes things, right? So we make things in Windsor Essex that make things. We are the original, we are the upstream where, all the way down the road, you're going to get a plastic bucket somewhere from, you name the home goods store. That plastic bucket, the tool that made the plastic bucket, very likely came from Windsor Essex. That product likely crossed the border multiple times before it was perhaps finally assembled or molded in the United States. Case in point, if I use the Chrysler Pacifica, proudly built in Windsor for upwards of 70 years, there are parts that go into that vehicle that have crossed the border 7 to 8 times, right? So every time, it's hard to unscramble that egg, and to use Doug Ford's terms, it's hard to unscramble that egg. Windsor Essex folks, we don't want to unscramble that egg, right? We want to make more eggs. We want to make sure that the industry can be diversified, but also is reliant on the United States, and that relationship, the long-term economic relationship, continues.
And I think that's a really good point that was just made, that we don't want to scramble the eggs, or we don't want to unscramble the eggs. We want more eggs. We want more eggs in the United States. We want more partners in the United States, because this is what's working for our industry. And as we've discussed, this industry has far-reaching implications for jobs in the rest of Canada.
Well, and Mr. Carney and the Liberals want everyone to think that our relationship with the United States is a weakness. Again, talk to any other country on the planet and ask them, hey, if you could trade places with Canada in terms of our geopolitical position and our geographical position with the United States, would you have to think about it? And most of them would say, absolutely not. I would trade places with you in a heartbeat, right next to the most prosperous economy on the planet. And you have a integrated supply chain where both countries actually benefit from it. The amount of trade that goes over that, but are you kidding me? Plus, they're the largest military on the planet.
They're the third largest country in the world, third largest population in the world. They've got the most English speakers of any other country in the world, if I'm not mistaken. Like, these are all people who want to buy Canadian.
So this is not an issue of, all right, so Every company that is trading with the US, you should be trading with Europe. You should be trading with China. You should be trading with everybody else. No, this is a short-term issue. And all Canada has to do is send Mark Carney down to Washington like he promised he would do, get a deal done like he promised he would do, and we get through this short-term issue, and we're not going to look back. He keeps talking about the fact that this has been an ongoing relationship for over 70 years for these companies. Hello?
Well, and could you imagine, say your grandfather built a company making dyes and molds, and they've been successful up until this point, and now that maybe you're in charge of the company, or maybe you're apprenticing, or you're working there, your government comes in and says, well, we think you guys should trade with Europe instead. That is just unforgivable.
Right. And again, Donald Trump isn't going to be there forever. He's only going to be there for a couple more years. So, like, what kind of reactionary, non-strategic thinking is, oh, Donald Trump's back, well, I guess we better change the entire way that our country does business, despite the fact that he's only going to be there for a finite amount of time.
But beyond that, even while Donald Trump is in office, it is Mark Carney's job and his ministers to get a deal done.